As I sat at my parents' Thanksgiving table, surrounded by the familiar sights of my childhood home, I felt a rare calm. These visits, now that I was 60, provided a peaceful escape from the tense atmosphere at my own house. My daughter Emma chatted happily with her grandmother, their voices filling the room with joy. It was a stark difference from the quiet, strained conversations I often had with Richard, my husband. Suddenly, my phone buzzed loudly, interrupting the warmth of the moment. Richard's name appeared on the screen, instantly making me uneasy. Taking a deep breath, I excused myself from the table. "Sorry, it's Richard. I'll just take this in the kitchen." But as I stood up, I accidentally activated the speakerphone. "Hey Elaine, enjoying yourself there?" "Well, don't bother coming back." Richard's voice sounded oddly cheerful, echoing through the room. I froze, holding the phone as his words hung in the air. "What do you mean, Richard?" "Oh, I've decided it's time for a change. I've moved Emma's stuff into the house. There's no room for you anymore." The room fell into silence. Emma dropped her fork with a loud clatter, her eyes wide in disbelief. "Richard, what are you talking about?" My voice trembled as I spoke, my heart racing. "It's simple. Emma doesn't want to come home because of you. Without you around, she can live the life she deserves, like when she was younger. So, you need to leave." Emma stood up suddenly, her face flushing with anger. "Dad, what is going on?" "Stay out of this, Emma." Richard's voice cut her off, icy and firm. "This is between me and your mother." My cheeks burned with a mix of shame and anger. "You want me to leave our home just like that?" "Yeah, find some shelter or whatever. It's not my problem." The call ended abruptly, leaving a heavy silence. My mother reached out, her hand trembling. "Elaine, honey." Before she could finish, Emma burst into bitter laughter. "He's lost it, Grandma. Completely lost it." Inside, I was a whirlwind of emotions, shame, anger, and a strange feeling of freedom. He better be ready. I thought to myself, this isn't the end, it's just the beginning. That night, lying in my childhood bed with moonlight casting shadows, memories flooded back. Richard and I hadn't always been distant and cold. There was a time when his eyes held warmth and his touch felt safe. I met Richard when I was in my late 20s. He was charming, confident, and seemed to have all the answers. His charisma drew me in, and within a year of meeting, we were married. A whirlwind romance that felt like a fairy tale. But the fairy tale began to crack soon after Emma was born. Richard adored our daughter, but as his love for her grew, his feelings towards me seemed to diminish. It was as if there was only room in his heart for one person. "Elaine, can't you see? You're suffocating her. Give her space," he would scold. Whenever I tried to be part of Emma's life, his words hurt, though I thought he was just being an overly protective father. As Emma grew older, Richard's resentment towards me deepened. The man who once cherished me now barely acknowledged my existence, except to criticize. "Why can't you be more like Emma? She's only 10 and already so independent," he'd sneer. I remember the night Emma, at 15, won a school award. We were supposed to celebrate together as a family, but Richard turned it into a lecture. "Elaine, why can't you achieve anything like our daughter? You're wasting your life." His words pierced like daggers. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling years of his disdain weighing on me. It wasn't just his words. It was the dismissive looks, the heavy sighs, the way he'd turn away when I entered a room. I had become invisible and insignificant in my own home. That night, lying in the silence, something stirred inside me. Richard's callousness, his disregard for our life together, it ignited a determination in me. I refused to let him erase me from my own story. Turning on my side, I closed my eyes, but sleep eluded me. The shadows seemed to whisper, urging me to rise up, to reclaim myself. And deep down, I knew I was ready to take that step. The next morning, I woke up with a newfound clarity I hadn't felt in years. During breakfast, Mom tried to talk about Richard's call, but I changed the subject. I wasn't ready to confront that issue just yet, and Emma sensed my hesitation and didn't push. As we tidied up, my mind wandered back to the years with Richard. His controlling behavior wasn't limited to our daughter. It permeated every part of our lives, tightening like a vice around my freedom. "Elaine, don't stay late at work. You need to be home to cook," he would insist, dismissing my job at the library that I loved. His rules were unpredictable and meant to keep me off balance. If I wore something he didn't like, he'd scoff. Trying to impress someone, focus on being a better wife and mother. Even my friendships weren't safe. You spend too much time with Linda Sheck, a bad influence, he once said, cutting through years of friendship. But it wasn't just the control, it was the humiliation at social events. He'd undermine me with fake compliments, often in front of Emma. Elaine tries her best, but you know she's not the brightest bulb. He'd laugh, his words a painful reminder of his contempt. Emma witnessed it all. At first she tried to defend me, but Richard's influence was overpowering. "Mom, just ignore him," she'd whisper, her eyes filled with frustration. I couldn't forget the day Emma left for college. Richard glowed with pride, yet there was a coldness in his gaze when he looked at me. "See, Elaine, this is what happens when you raise a child right. She's not like you, thank God." Those words cut deeper than anything, implying I had no role in our daughter's upbringing. That my years of love and sacrifice were worthless. As these memories swirled in my mind, a simmering anger rose within me. Enough was enough. I wouldn't let Richard control my life any longer. The phone call had been the final straw. It was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. I looked at Emma, seeing her determination reflected back at me. "Emma, there's something important I need to do when we get home. It's going to change everything, but I need you to trust me." Emma nodded firmly. "I'm with you, Mom." Completely. The drive back was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts, knowing we were heading towards a crucial confrontation with Richard. Once home, I excused myself to my room under the guise of unpacking, but really to make a call that would set everything in motion. I dialed the number of a divorce attorney I had discreetly noted down months ago. My hands trembled as the call connected. "Hello, this is Elaine Richardson. I need to discuss filing for divorce." Mr. Adams, the lawyer, was calm and understanding. "I can help you through this, Mrs. Richardson. It sounds like you're dealing with a challenging situation." As I recounted Richard's behavior over the years, Mr. Adams listened attentively. "We can file for divorce on grounds of emotional abuse. It seems like you have a strong case." Feeling empowered, I responded firmly, "I'm proceeding with this, and I want him to face consequences, both legally and financially." Mr. Adams reassured me, "We'll work to ensure you receive what you're entitled to." After the call, a mix of fear and exhilaration washed over me. For the first time in years, I was taking charge of my life. Later that evening, Richard returned home, his demeanor smug and victorious. "Back so soon. Realize you have nowhere else to go." His words stung, but I stood my ground. "I went to my parents' house, Richard. Remember the place you practically forced me into?" He scoffed. "I did us a favor. Emma and I are better off without you." "That's where you're mistaken," I said firmly. "Emma isn't a pawn in your games, and I'm not your captive anymore." Richard's face twisted in anger. "What nonsense are you talking? You think you can survive without me?" Meeting his gaze, my resolve remained steady. "Watch me." Emma entered the room, her expression showing determination. "Dad, you've crossed the line. Mom doesn't deserve this." Richard sneered. "Oh, now you're on her side? I thought you understood, Emma. Your mother is worthless." Emma's eyes flashed with anger. "No, Dad. The only worthless thing here is your cruelty. We're done living under your control." As we stood together against Richard's hostility, I knew we had reached a turning point. The battle lines were drawn, and I was prepared to fight for my freedom. The morning after our confrontation, the atmosphere in the house felt tense. Richard's usual arrogance was heightened, as if he was challenging us to defy him. While making breakfast, my hands trembled slightly, but my determination held strong. At the table, Richard broke the silence with his usual condescension. "So, Elaine, have you finally realized your place? Ready to beg for forgiveness?" I kept my voice steady. "There's no need for me to beg, Richard. It's you who should be reflecting on your actions." He laughed bitterly. "You've always been out of touch, Elaine, but this is a new low." Emma, who had been quiet until then, spoke up firmly. "Dad, this isn't a joke. Mom is serious about filing for divorce." Richard's face twisted through confusion, disbelief, and then erupted into anger. "Divorce? You think you can just walk away from me after everything I've done for this family?" "It's because of what you've done," I interjected, my voice firm. "Years of belittling, controlling, and humiliating me. I won't tolerate it any longer." Richard slammed his fist on the table, his face flushed with rage. "I built this family. Without me, you're nothing." Emma stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. "You didn't build this family, Dad. You've torn it apart. And Mom isn't just something You've treated her like nothing." His eyes darted between us, a wild intensity growing. "You're ganging up on me, your own husband, your own father." "This isn't about sides, Richard," I said evenly, the turmoil churned inside me. "What you've done is unforgivable." Richard's bitter laugh filled the room. "You think you can leave and everything will be fine. You have no clue what's coming." I met his gaze firmly. "I know exactly what I'm facing, freedom from you." Emma stood beside me, resolute. "We're done with your control, Dad. It's over." Richard abruptly stood, his chair crashing behind him. "You'll regret this, both of you. You have no idea what I'm capable of." As he stormed out, the tension he left behind was suffocating. But in that tension, there was also a profound sense of liberation. The battle had begun, and I was ready to fight for my freedom, my dignity, and my daughter's future. The days after our confrontation with Richard were a whirlwind of activity. I met with Mr. Adams multiple times, meticulously planning the divorce proceedings. "We'll ensure you receive what's rightfully yours, Elaine, both financially and legally," Mr. Adams assured me. Richard's reaction to the divorce papers was explosive. He barged into the house one evening, papers in hand, his face a mask of rage. "You're really going through with this? Do you even understand what you're doing, Elaine?" I faced him calmly, despite my inner turmoil. "Yes, Richard, I do. For the first time in years, I'm making a decision for myself." Richard laughed mockingly. "You really believe you can survive without me? You're nothing without my money, my support." "I'm not afraid of being on my own, Richard. I'm more afraid of spending another day under the same roof as you," I replied firmly. Emma, hearing the argument, came downstairs. "What's going on?" "Your mother has lost her mind," Richard sneered. "She thinks she can just take half of everything I've worked hard for." "It's not just what you've earned, Dad. It's what Mom has endured all these years. She deserves every penny and more." Emma shot back. Richard's gaze hardened. "Don't be naive, Emma. This will destroy us all." "No, Dad, it will liberate us, especially Mom." As the days stretched into weeks, our home became a tense, silent battlefield. Richard relocated to the guest room, his presence casting a heavy shadow over everything. Despite his attempts to sway me, my decision was resolute. The day of our first court hearing arrived. Sitting in the courtroom, waiting for proceedings to commence, I felt an unusual calmness wash over me. I knew deep down that I was making the right choice, not just for myself, but for Emma too. Richard, however, appeared visibly nervous. When his lawyer broached the topic of a settlement, a small smile crept onto my face. Richard, who had always prided himself on control, was now at the mercy of the legal system. As the judge reviewed our case, Richard grew visibly paler. When the judge turned to me and asked if I wished to add anything, I took a steadying breath. "Your Honor, for years I endured emotional abuse and manipulation at the hands of my husband. I seek not vengeance, but justice, for myself and for my daughter." The judge nodded solemnly. "I understand, Mrs. Richardson. This court will ensure a fair and just resolution." Leaving the courtroom, I caught Richard's defeated expression. It was enough for me to know that while the battle wasn't over, I had won this initial round. I was prepared for whatever lay ahead. In the weeks that followed, my life felt like it was constantly under scrutiny, analyzed by lawyers and the court. But with each passing day, I felt stronger, more in control of my own destiny. Richard's attempts to intimidate me grew more desperate and less effective over time. The final court hearing became a day I both dreaded and eagerly awaited. As Richard and I sat across from each other in the courtroom, I couldn't help but reflect on the man I once loved, now a stranger filled with bitterness. The judge's voice was unwavering as he delivered the verdict. "The court rules in favor of Mrs. Richardson. Mr. Richardson, you are obligated to pay alimony and half of your assets." Richard's face twisted in shock and anger. He abruptly stood up, his chair crashing to the ground. "This is ridiculous. She doesn't deserve a single penny." "Mr. Richardson, control yourself," the judge admonished firmly. "The court's decision is final." As we exited the courtroom, Richard's parting words dripped with venom. "You'll regret this, Elaine. You think you've won, but you haven't seen the end of me." But I no longer feared him. His once cutting words now sounded hollow and powerless. Over the following months, I secured a small apartment near Emma's place. I began a new job at a local library, a place that always brought me solace. The alimony from Richard provided me with a financial independence I hadn't known in years. Emma and I grew closer, our relationship no longer overshadowed by Richard's presence. She flourished in her career and personal life, a stark contrast to the fearful young woman she once was. As for Richard, the last I heard, he was leading a diminished life, his pride and finances greatly reduced. His attempts to reconnect with Emma and me were met with silence. The man who once wielded so much power over us now exists only as a memory, a faint echo of the past. Often, I sit on my balcony with a cup of tea, gazing out at the tranquil neighborhood. Here, I found a sense of peace and purpose that eluded me for so long. Emma visits frequently, and we share conversations about everything and nothing. Our bond, forged in adversity, has grown unbreakable. Looking ahead, I face the future with hope and a profound sense of freedom. Emerging from the shadows of my past, I've grown stronger and more resilient. I've come to understand that sometimes the most challenging battles lead to the greatest triumphs. As for Richard, he remains nothing more than a distant echo, a reminder of a life I once lived and the strength I discovered in leaving it behind.